Hello, I hope you'll join us on Voice of Rio Grande this month, where we'll be doing a retrospective on the life and career of Peggy Lipton, the actress. Hope you'll join us. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Richard Sachs, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College in beautiful southeastern Ohio. And this month, July of 2019, I am dedicating my show to a retrospective in memoriam for Margaret Ann, call me Peggy Lipton, born in 1946 and passed away in May of 2019, just 2 months ago. Some of you may remember Peggy Lipton from the 5 years she was on the Mod Squad, and I'd like to give a little bit of background on her life. She was born August 30th, 1946, to artist Rita Benson. Her mother was born in Dublin, but her parents had been raised in Latvia. They were Latvian Jews, and her father was corporate lawyer Harold Lipton, whose father had changed the name from Lipschitz, Lipschitz. So she had a Russian Jewish father and a Latvian Jewish mother. As I watched Peggy Lipton, I never thought of her as a Jewish girl at all. I thought of her as a blonde California girl, which is exactly what she was. But again, so she was raised in a very affluent household. And if we go back to either or both of those first two pictures, Mike, because she's easier on the eyes than I am. She was raised, so she's born in New York City, raised on Long Island until 1964. And so at the age of 18, her family moved to Los Angeles, and she called herself a Topanga Canyon hippie. If you're familiar at all with the way Los Angeles is set up, it is ringed in by mountains. That's one of the reasons they have smog. That the wind comes in off the Pacific Ocean, and up around Pasadena, La Cañada, you have the mountains. Then they cut down toward Riverside, but essentially you have mountains there. If you go over those mountains, especially from West LA and Santa Monica, you end up in some of the canyons, including Topanga Canyon. There's a Jacob Dylan documentary that just came out a few months ago talking about his father, Bob Dylan, and Joni Mitchell, and many of the other people like Peggy Lipton, the Mamas and the Papas, David Crosby, who went up to that Topanga Canyon area, which now is incredibly expensive. But back then, you could get one-bedroom cottages for $80 a month, and hippies would go out there. Beautiful area, close to West LA, close to the beach. Keep in mind, she's born in 1946. We define baby boomers as those born between 1946 and 1964. Being born in 1946, that makes her at the very start of the baby boom generation. And so again, she became of age in her late teens. Her incredible good looks, I think most of us would say, that beautiful face, allowed her to sign as a Ford agency model in 1961. She was 15 years old. She was in 9th grade. She was modeling in New York City at the time. So in 1964, when they moved to LA, her father's a big-time corporate lawyer. I don't know exactly how it happened, but she signed a contract with Universal Pictures. She's 18 years old, never went to college. And instead, she has a contract with Universal Pictures for the next 4 years till she signed on to the Mod Squad. And her guest appearances included, raise your hands if you've heard of any of these shows, The John Forsythe Show, Bewitched, The Virginian, The Invaders. Do you remember that show with invaders from foreign planets who acted like they were human beings? She was a guest. She had a guest appearance on that. The Road West, The FBI, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and Mr. Novak. So those things happen. At this point, it's 1968. She's barely 21. She's just turning 22 in late August. And she is cast on the Mod Squad. And the Mod Squad was the brainchild of a number of Hollywood writers who then approached Danny Thomas, yes, that Danny Thomas of Make Room for Daddy, father of Marlo Thomas, who, even though he was an on-screen actor, made much more money and was much more significant to American TV as an executive producer. And Danny Thomas combined with Aaron Spelling, probably the premier TV producer in American TV for the latter half of the 20th century. And the two of them are executive producers on all 5 years of the Mod Squad. So if we move on to some of the Mod Squad pictures we have, in 1968, the Mod Squad starts. It shows at 7:30 to 8:30 on Tuesday nights. And again, keep in mind, this is before cable TV. It was the three major channels, and then you had what we called UHF back then, which was usually, rather than VHF, and that would be public television and maybe a few other things. So you had three channels plus a few more. And they were on ABC. And in 1968, they were given, they had that Tuesday at 7:30 slot for 4 years. The last year they moved Thursday 8 to 9. And the way it was, the way the show was marketed is not anything we would do since the Me Too movement started. Some of the advertising copy you can access now. They said, the Mod Squad, one black, one white, one blonde. I don't think Hollywood would make that nowadays, but that's exactly what they did. And I can tell you, as a junior high and high school age kid, I was in love with Peggy Lipton, and all my friends know that to this day. When she died, my friend Cliff Hirschman from LA says, Richard, so sorry to hear the dream is over. Your pal Link, which is one of the other guys on the show. Then my friend Rob sees that and says, Cliff wrote a haiku. So sorry to hear the dream is over, the whole thing. Mike Thompson here said, sorry, Richard, the end on dream and possibilities. Elizabeth Bonowitz, my math and science chair, sent me, how does she know? Well, apparently she knows. My younger brother, Leonard, your old crush, right? Scroll down and he links the article. So they argued that Aaron Spelling described the female character that he wanted, Peggy Lipton, and apparently they cast Clarence Williams III as Link Hayes real quickly. And he's the African-American from South Central with the big afro. And he always says solid. You know, if anything is good, he just says solid. And Link is cool, but he comes from a poor background. Now, of course, he knows Sammy Davis Jr. and all these other people who are famous performers. I'll talk more about Sammy Davis Jr. in a little bit. And then they cast Michael Cole as Pete Cochran. So the two male characters, the white and black male characters, were cast. Supposedly, she was the 251st female character. They couldn't find the right person. And Aaron Spelling said he wanted a waif-like, W-A-I-F, waif-like and vulnerable female. So again, the storyline on the three of them is Link comes from South Central, comes from Watts or Compton, inner city kid, raised by a single mom. And over the 5 years, he interacts with people who sold him barbecue, and he interacts with Sammy Davis Jr., who's supposedly from their neighborhood, but has become Sammy Davis Jr. and is now a famous African-American entertainer. The Michael Cole character, Pete Cochran, comes from Beverly Hills, and he's kicked out of his house, essentially, for being a teenage screw-up. And then Peggy Lipton's character, Julie Barnes, was raised in San Francisco to a single mom who was a prostitute, and she ran away from home. So she was a teenage runaway, and those are the stories. And all three of them then are arrested on minor things, minor offenses, misdemeanors, and Captain Greer then decides, you know what, I'm going to create a mod squad here of these kids. And keep in mind, the mod movement starts in about 1964 in London. And mod is shortened for modern, but that mod period, the polka dots, the wide collars. And now you can see, if you go back to that picture, Mike, you can see Captain Greer. Captain Greer is played by Tige Andrews, T-I-G-E. His name was actually Tiger. Tige Andrews' parents were best friends with Danny Thomas's parents because apparently they lived in a similar part of LA, and they are both, Danny Thomas's heritage is Lebanese. And Tiger Andrews, known as Tige Andrews, is also Lebanese American. I don't know exactly the degree of the connection with Danny Thomas's family. Tige Andrews, born 1920, died in 2007. So again, in the series is 1968 to 73. He would have been between 48 and 53 years of age, which is perfect. You know, he's the lieutenant. And then the others are all in their early 20s at that time. So again, I've mentioned the one black, one white, one blonde. Another piece of marketing they used was the hippest and first undercover cops on TV. Michael Cole, the Pete character, talks about the fact that when he was pitched the idea, he said, "I don't like it. You mean we're going to be narcs? I'm not going to do that." And Aaron Spelling said, "You're perfect for the role. That's exactly what I want. I want you to be arguing about the parts, about you're still, you know, a creative kid, you're still an independent kid, you're still countercultural. I want that. You're perfect for the role." So he was happy with that. One thing that's really bizarre if you watch it now, and I never noticed it as a kid back then, but none of them have weapons, ever. The first year they have a 1949 Woody that gave them a lot of problems both on and off screen, and they blew it up on the show, the last episode of the first season. Also, an interesting point for people who love cars like me and Mike, the first year all the cars are Fords. It's a 49 Ford Woody, and the captain's always driving a 68 or 67 or 68 Ford Galaxy. And then after the first year, they went with Chrysler products, year 2 through 5. So everybody's driving Chrysler products. And in 71, 72, Link and Pete are frequently in one of the ugliest Chrysler convertibles you will ever see. That was not a great period of time for Chrysler products. So again, the Mod Squad, one black, one white, one blonde, the hippest and first undercover cops on TV. Realize this started 1968, and rankings were incredibly important, Nielsen rankings. At the end of the first year, they were ranked 28th, which was good for a new show. There were 100 and some shows every year. So they're ranked 28th. That's not bad. They had a 20.5 rating. That is unheard of nowadays with cable TV. That means, you know, of the 20.5% of the TVs, 1 out of every 5 are watching that program. With a couple hundred cable channels now, you're never going to get a 20.5 unless it's like the Super Bowl or something. But back then with just 3 channels, that just got you 28th. By their second season, 1969-1970, they went up to 23rd. They had a 20.8 rating. Their best season in terms of Nielsen ratings was their third season, 1970-71. They were up to 11th. 11th most popular show, 22.7 rating. And Peggy Lipton won a Golden Globe Award for Best TV Actress in a Drama. She is 24 years old. That's amazing. At the same time, she was always interested in a musical career. And the song Stony End, which Barbra Streisand made a hit in 1970, she actually recorded first. Laura Nyro, that's N-Y-R-O. Laura Nyro has a lot of cred in terms of folk music. She was a performer and a writer. And Laura Nyro wrote Stony End, and it charted at a number 121 in 1968 for Peggy Lipton at the age of 22. So realize she's interacting with music people and she's interacting with film and TV people in LA. And she is a beautiful and from what everybody said, an incredibly kind and thoughtful person. So she is, at times she's been called the it girl of the period, IT. She is a model of femininity for the period, for young women at least. The fourth year is still Tuesday night. It dropped to 21st, 21.5 rating. And the last year, the fifth year, They moved to Thursday night 8 to 9, fell to 54th in ratings and a 16.5 Nielsen rating. At the end of the show's 5-year run, she married Quincy Jones, the African-American musician and songmaker. They were married for 16 years, from 1974 to 1990. They had 2 daughters, both of whom are actresses. The oldest daughter, Kidada Jones, was born in 1974. I'm not going to do the math with you. I think it's a similar situation to Shakespeare, 18-year-old Shakespeare marrying a 28-year-old Anne Hathaway. And 5.5 months later, Anne Hathaway gives birth to 2 living twins, Judith and Hamnet. Not Hamlet, but Hamnet. As my mother, the pediatrician, who passed away in 2008, said, in 1582, when that would have been, kids of 5.5 months gestation did not live. The whole point being, Shakespeare had probably married a pregnant already Anne Hathaway, presumably with his own children. And that was probably the same situation because they got married and Kidada was born in almost the same month. 2 years later, Rashida Jones is born. Rashida is the daughter actress who's become actually pretty famous, of fame compared with her mother. Kidada gets some acting roles, but not in the same way. She divorced Quincy Jones in 1990. They remained very amicable friends throughout the balance of their life. For the first, until her daughters were late in high school, she essentially gave up acting and was a stay-at-home mom in Hollywood and a stay-at-home wife for Quincy Jones. And even though they got divorced in 1990, they remained very amicable. As Ray Matura here has said, Quincy Jones has withdrawn his security detail from his ex-wife, so it would have been okay for me to show up at the funeral, but I still chose not to. So I just want you guys to know that. In the early 90s, she kind of had a comeback on TV. She played Norma Jennings in Twin Peaks in 1990 and 91. Now, I've never seen that show, but I've heard it's very interesting. And being a Peggy Lipton devotee with the wall art to prove it, maybe I should watch that show. She then was in multiple movies with Twin Peaks because I guess it was just a TV series for 2 years, and then they had 2 movies, and she again reprised the role of Norma Jennings in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me in 1992, and in 2014, Twin Peaks The Missing Pieces. Throughout the 90s and the first decade of the 2000s, she continued to play bit roles in movies. She didn't do any more TV. For me, her most memorable role during that period is what is often seen as one of Kevin Costner's worst movies, and I know some people would say that there's a large category there, but The Postman, the movie about a water world in the future. Do you recall that she plays Ellen March? She would have been 51 at that point. And if you put on the last picture we have of her, which is at 65, so you can still see late in life, and she passed away at the age of 71, a few months short of her 72nd birthday. She was a very beautiful woman throughout her life, and I think she did a wonderful job in a bit role in The Postman. But again, the movie doesn't hold up real well. In 2004, she was diagnosed with colon cancer and had a relapse of that within the last couple years, and again passed away in May of 2019. The last movie she did was voicing the adult Hannah in A Dog's Purpose, which I think is a young adult movie that I haven't seen. So again, I think it's a fascinating life. I haven't pulled quotations from her daughters, but they both say that she's the inspiration of their life. Many of the eulogies that came in noted what a kind person she was, how generous she was, and how devoted she was to her friends and specifically her daughters. She was divorced from Quincy Jones for 29 years before she died. As both my adult sons and many other people have told me, Richard, you have a chance, allez-y, cherchez les femmes. But it was not Bashert. It was not meant to be, apparently. But again, I think it's a fascinating series. I have all 5 years of Mod Squad on DVD. I've tried to pitch the student affairs people here, let's have a Mod Squad like marathon for the students, and it hasn't taken off, so I don't think that's going to happen. But there's a couple points I'd make before I close today. Number one, 1968 to 73, people were really dedicated to television shows. I can remember a few years earlier when the Monkees were on Monday night, 7:30 to 8. And that was a time I had to watch the Monkees. And then a few years later, Mod Squad comes on, and that's Tuesday night, 7:30 to 8:30. And again, that was dedicated time because you weren't able to watch it elsewhere. You'd miss it. You'd hear about the program, and then you'd wait till next summer when they'd show the rerun at least once because they go into reruns. And that would be it. And so there was a real dedication, and I think, first of all, the clothes, she's talked about the fact that the clothes were so bright, and she didn't feel like wearing, stripes on top of bell bottoms with big polka dots and things like that. But they wanted her to be a hippie, and they felt that's what a hippie looks like. They are so off with some of the things, some of the drug taking. The independent newspaper called The Guru, Guru, even the way people dance and the kind of music they have, it looks like you have a 55-year-old Danny Thomas and Aaron Spelling imagining what the young kids are doing and then scripting it for these people. However, there's heart in this series. There's one show where they befriend a mom who's a pregnant mom, single mom who's having drug problems, and they get her help and they get the baby delivered, which is then born addicted, and they deal with that. And at the end of the show, as they do the outre, and have we shown the clip yet? Okay, we'll do that right after I finish this story then. As they focus on that, so they've dealt with the issue of single moms who are on drugs and babies being born who are addicted. Then as they're panning away and you think the show's over, Michael Cole's voice comes on as an overdub, and he says, if any of you are out there and you have drug problems, or you're a single mom, or you need some help, call your county health officials and they'll help you. Can you guys imagine that happening at the end of a TV show now? I mean, I think we've become so cynical as a society, it would be absurd. I'm streaming that. Don't lecture to me. But they felt like they had the right to do that because you're still watching the show at the end. You're even watching the credits, so you must love the show. And so we're going to use this to share that with you. So again, the great music, and within a minute or two of each new show, it would always kick into something like this, and I think Mike Thompson now is going to run what I think we would call the Mod Squad intro, and then there's an outro that's very similar, but I don't think we have that on tape. So here's the Mod Squad intro. Again, this is Pete. So this is Pete, and Pete frequently wore Oxford cloth shirts. Look at, now, as cool as Link is, notice how he's dressed. He's dressed like a preppy kid from New England. I mean, again, they're trying to make him likable, and there's Peggy Lipton, of course. Her hair is all over the place. She needs help. There's the guys to help her out. And there's T.J. Andrews, there's the captain. And again, they are the Mod Squad for a lot of reasons, because they're young, because they're multicultural, because they're multi-gendered. But also this point, as I was saying earlier, they had no guns. They had no weapons. They have guns and knives pulled on them all the time. They never get shot, thank God. They disarm the guys with the knives, and they hit them, and they chase them, and they tackle them, and then the captain shows up, or the police show up. So for 5 years, I don't think I would put undercover cops out on the street without any weapons, but that's exactly what they did, and I think that was part of the flower child mentality of, we don't want them shooting people, we don't want them hurting people, we just want them apprehending the bad guys. And again, there's so many other issues. As I've watched this show with my 12-year-old Gareth, he was good enough to watch the entire first season with me, and then about halfway through the second season, he made a very interesting point and bailed on me, because he said, the first season, it was about issues. The second season, it's about individuals. For example, Link let his driver's license expire, so he had to go to the DMV, and of course the person who's going to take him out on his driving test is a gorgeous 25-year-old African-American woman. And Link is so sexist, like you, where's the guy? And then she's so beautiful that he drives like an idiot, and she fails him. And then the rest of that episode is Link trying to date her, and it turns out she's got a problem with her ex-husband, and then that becomes the episode for the series. But I thought that was an interesting observation by my 12-year-old, that initially it's issues like sexism and anti-war and single moms, and then suddenly the second year, yeah, we're still dealing with some of those issues, but I think, this is like Link's episode, and this is Julie's episode where she falls in love with the guy, and this is Pete's episode. Yeah, it was more of a soap opera. Yeah, good point. And Pete especially, so good looking, all of the are always plain. So again, he doesn't have an and again, I think most people would think, aha, this is good for our female audience, okay? You may not be a good looker, Mildred, but look at Pete. He just cares about a really nice woman. He doesn't have to be with the most beautiful woman in the room, who's Peggy Lipton. No, he's with this plain, mousy brunette who's got a problem or an issue. And again, I should have said this earlier. I know we're in our last 30 seconds. The guest stars were incredible. Sammy Davis Jr. 3 times, always as the same person. Ed Asner 3 times as different people. Andy Griffith, Vincent Price, Stephanie Powers, Cesar Romero, Lou Gossett Jr., Danny Thomas himself, Tyne Daly 2 times, Jim Backus, Fernando Lamas, Cleavon Little, Bobby Sherman, Tony Dow, and Barbara McNair, all guest starred from time to time. Again, Sammy Davis Jr. and Ed Asner 3 times. Sammy Davis Jr. always as himself. Ed Asner has 3 different roles. The best one is he's a carnival barker. He runs, isn't that Ed Asner? Just a big, heavy-set guy running a carnival. Some really interesting episodes. Thank you so much. Enjoy your summer. Come visit us in Rio Grande.